hear it yourself if you throw those on, and then you can kind of decide how far you're ready. So you can hear me nice and clear?
Yeah.
You can hear yourself? It's no secret that data has become king in the energy industry. But not just any data, we're talking about first-party, real-time, strategically significant data. But with access to so much information, how do you ensure that your collected data is being used to its maximum potential? Or that you're even collecting the right data in the first place? Some big questions and some bigger answers are just ahead on this episode of Plugged In. Hello and welcome everyone to a brand new episode of Plugged In. My name is Mark Babb, your host. Of course, this is our energy and utility podcast that discusses the challenges, solutions, and latest technological innovations of the industry. As you heard from that introduction, this episode is all about first-party data within the energy industry. This data is becoming more and more crucial due to the restrictions and limitations on third-party data. But are operators doing enough to leverage the true potential of this first-party data? Simply put, the answer is no. And as you'll hear in this episode, there's an obvious gap that needs to be strategically closed in order for energy operators to survive this next decade. Now, joining me for this big discussion, I'm very excited to welcome Lars Borgmann, the data capability lead at Merkle, a Fortune 1000 customer experience transformation business partner. And with over 50 locations worldwide, they have their finger on the pulse of driving new customer-centric model we're seeing in the industry. Lars, welcome to the show. Thank you for being with me. Really looking forward to discussing this gap in data, but it's a big topic. So yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for the invitation. It's really an interesting topic, and especially in the energy market, because if you think of first-party data, it's not the energy market that usually comes to your mind. It's rather the big FMCG or online players like Amazon, Google, all these things, but it's of tremendous importance, especially or even for B2B players like the energy branch.
Yeah, and let's talk about that. Let's start the conversation there, because there's been a big shift in the energy market that's still taking place, where it was linear and now is very customer-centric model where everything has to be related back to the customer. But providers have lost the ability to access third-party data, something that every industry is challenging with, and now they're having to rely on first-party data. So how is that impacting the strategy of operators and businesses from what you guys are seeing? It's a big shift they're having to all adapt to.
So it's not about, or what you said is right. So all devices, all interactions with your companies, with the brand, does create tons of data. And it's not about collecting the data, it's about the usage, the analysis of the data, and how you transfer these insights to your company. Because technically spoken, the collection is rather easy. But to find the right insights needs the capability and the knowledge about data, algorithms, all that kind of stuff. That is something you can buy from an agency, for example, from a service provider. But really, when it comes to use, the benefit or the value add of these insights, that's usually the crucial part, because especially in the energy market, we do see big players, huge companies, and then they form some startup departments kind of to work with data, to do the innovative things, to try out and work in a probably agile fashion, something like that. And in our experience, really the crucial thing is that you have a high-speed team in the startup department, but you do have your old-fashioned or your big company, and the handover of these insights or the collaboration. That is something what's really crucial to be somehow synchronized in terms of working. What questions do pop up, what can we answer, and how do we work with that? How do we integrate that into product development, into communication, or into, you already mentioned it, somehow strategic considerations?
Looking at the product side, because I think a lot of operators and different businesses the data that they're accessing now, that they'll have access to, has a significant impact on the products that they're going to develop. But they have to know that going into the even collecting of the data to make sure they're getting the right stuff. How do operators shift that thinking from having to think so proactively rather than just reacting to what's in front of them?
I think it's about displaying or highlighting the value of the data and see how you can work way faster and in a way more targeted fashion. But especially in these industry driven or industries that have that engineer mindset. So because the engineers did a great job for the last probably 100 years. And they created super smart inventions, created great products, but the feedback of the client was not that relevant because the amount of solutions was somehow limited. It was a people business. But now the competition is way harder because all solutions you can find in the internet, just Googling a bit. And therefore, it really creates a strategic advantage to make better, more informed decisions and to create products that base on the need of the users. For example, in Germany, the big car manufacturer, Audi, Mercedes, they have the idea that you must be able to drive backwards with a car for 10 kilometers with an average of 50 kilometers per hour. Never happens in reality, but that was the pride of the engineers. And it was the total opposite of being user-centric, because it's a feature you will never ever need. And that, if you come to that insight, you see that you really save a lot of time, a lot of budget, plus you're pretty close to your client if you can tailor some things directly to their needs.
Yeah. You touched on different elements of the business that have to be involved in communicating, and that's key. Do organizations have to restructure? Do they have to invent a new department that connects all these dots that were once in, separate little, they're basically 10 different companies within one in these big guys. How does that have to look in the future in order for them to connect everything so seamlessly? We see that we do have different stakeholders, different owner of different databases, different data sources, and they must be connected to really gain value from that. And the struggles we see in the market is if you change, for example, your email send-out. The connection to other data sources may change as well, but nobody knows. That screws up your machine learning models, your insights, whatever. And therefore, we see you need a proper data governance in place. Yep.
That means what are the processes, what are our ways of working, who's responsible for what, and talking about the responsibility, we see that new roles come up. Mm-hmm. Someone like a data quality engineer, for example, who cares about the quality. Do we really pull the right data? Do we pre-process it in the right way? And most important, someone who really is responsible for the whole thing. Someone like a data steward or you name it. Mm-hmm. These guys must really be in touch with all the stakeholders across the company to make sure that all changes are aligned and make sense from a data perspective. And what we see, these roles are somehow centralized because
they have to be.
Yes, and what I said, so you create value out of data by bridging gaps and combining data sets. And we see in terms of for the data part of the business that centralization is currently key. And that's a complicated one, right? Because, for example, we see that in headquarters, again talking about big companies, headquarters, they are super familiar with the topics, with thought leadership, all these aspects, But when it went to the clients, they have no clue, because that's the job of the businesses or of the local markets. Mm-hmm. So if you're in the US, you understand your US clients, you work locally with them, but the guys in the headquarter, who would be theoretically responsible for the centralization of the data, they don't know about their end consumer. And that's especially in B2B, one central challenge.
So you guys have your foot in a lot of different industries. So bridging off of that, is there a particular place where this industry can draw inspiration from when they're looking at centralizing this data management? Is there a particular industry that's maybe ahead? I think utility in general is pretty conservative when it comes to innovation and new steps forward. But is there a particular one that you guys have worked with or that you know that we can look at?
2 years ago, we did a big study in Germany and in Switzerland and asked 300 companies about their maturity in terms of data, data-driven applications, all that kind of stuff. And we were super surprised that there are no differences between the different verticals. So the energy sector is not more or less mature compared to the insurance sector, for example. Okay. We're talking about first-party data, right? Yeah. So the interaction data. So when we're talking about data science, for example, insurance companies, they are super good because risk management is part of their business. But one of the central insights of that study was really there are no differences between branches. There are no difference in terms of size of the company, surprisingly. And that led us to the insight that it's a mindset, it's an organizational thing and less a technical one.
Okay, so it's really everyone's kind of in the same page when it comes to that, because we're dealing with all this is a new way of thinking, a new way that people have to think when it comes to first party data. So what are those first steps then that a company can take, big or small? How do they get started in this without overwhelming themselves of a massive task ahead? Mm-hmm.
So the very first step is usually to find use cases from a business perspective, from an end consumer or a client perspective that makes sense, that create value for your business, that help to connect with the users and that are somehow easy to implement. That would be the first step. Because what we often experience that companies hire a data scientist, for example, and they say, okay, now do your data science magic, and they don't know what to do, because it always fails if you work with data without a clear direction and the clear questions. So the very first step from our perspective, and we made pretty good experiences with that, is really defining a set of use cases. For example, real-time feedback from the consumer, or user journey orchestration to send out automated emails with the right content at the right time. Prioritize these use cases and derive some functionalities to say, okay, what do we need if we want to tackle these or that use cases, and then translate it into a technical architecture, but way more important to translate it into a sensible roadmap that includes the stakeholders, the different departments, and that really guides you a clear way. But the basis is really the use case from the business and not from the data.
That has to be the first point. So the benefit of working with a partner like yourselves, rather than just going out on our own, we're looking at long-term partnerships that ensure long-term success. And that's the benefit, I guess, with working with a team that understands this challenge perhaps more than their internal struggle do, rather than just hiring a data person, like you said. Working with a partner that can help make this a long-term lasting solution is probably the most accurate way to go, I guess, given how new this all is, right?
It's a classical consultant answer. It depends.
Very well.
So we have a very broad array of different capabilities, for example, as we at the agency. And that brings us into the situation that we can cover different situations. So, for example, yesterday I had a discussion, and the company created created great insights from data, but it wasn't tangible. It wasn't fun for the analysts to work with them, for example. And now we are checking, okay, how can we support from a user experience perspective? So how can we help you to create a tangible product, for example, out of your data? And that is what somehow, or what makes us a bit different, that we have a background in marketing, and we do have designers, we do have UX consultants that really help you to create products people like to work with. Because in the end, it's about, or the most efficient tool is the one you really use, for example. So bottom line, we're capable to deal with different situations, really, and we are in the situation that as a network and as a local, or in the DACH region located company, we can contribute from really soup to nuts, from strategy and concept to data science, to data visualization, and enrich these these solutions with a good user experience. Because that's something that engineer mindset usually forgets. The user experience that you need, the tool people love to work with, or application.
You mentioned there the DACH region. Is there geographical differences in the way that businesses approach something like this based on your experience?
I'd say the DACH region is rather a bit conservative due to legal restrictions, and the mindset, especially in Germany, differs maybe a bit compared to the US mindset. General data protection aspects are way more important, or are way more obvious in Germany. And when it comes, for example, to considerations like, do we work, or do our colleagues, do our employees work with the tools, that kind of stuff, can we check it? We always have issues or discussions with the workers' union, for example. So I'd say the US is far ahead, the UK a bit, and we're, I think, a bit behind.
Does that disadvantage them in that situation, or does it just create a different end game? Because you would think, if someone's more conservative, traditionally you would think, hey, they're going to be behind, but maybe not.
I don't know, to be honest, yet. I think that the future has to show. But we're somehow a bit disconnected, because people see mind-blowing applications from the US, and we have to say, no, we can't deliver that in that way. We have to be a bit more creative to deal with the challenges with the data, to find a proper solution. I'm a bit reluctant to say it's a big disadvantage, because what you said is usually if you're not that far, you find other solutions to tackle these aspects. Yeah,
it forces you to maybe think a little bit longer about what you need versus just jumping on. If there's no restriction, you pick something off the shelf. Maybe that's not always an advantage.
Yeah, exactly. And they're coming back to the use cases and what you said. The whole business, for example, especially in energy, is somehow changing. Mm-hmm. And we could try out so many things. I guess, or I assume, or I think it's better really to have a clear idea of the business and have a clear idea of the value add derived from the data to make a sustainable impact instead of trying out everything.
Yeah, and this is something everyone has to get on board with. This isn't going away. The reliance on data is only going to get more prevalent in the future. So it seems like a super relevant topic you can't ignore.
I hope so, because it's our business.
Yeah, I love it. No, that's brilliant. I think that's some really nice advice for those listening. A great way to bring this conversation to a close. So I really appreciate the time today, Lars. Thank you so much for the talk. Any final notes before we close up?
No, I don't think so. The companies do know their data. They see the impact and the importance of the data right now. So I'm pretty optimistic and looking forward to create new solutions with different stakeholders. So
data everyone is on their mind. It's about peeling that onion back a few layers and really understanding what they're collecting in the first place.
Sure.
Excellent. Brilliant. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And to everyone watching, thank you very much for joining us on this episode to talk data and that big gap within a company, first-party data. It's fantastic discussion. I've learned a lot. Hopefully you have as well. If you have any questions about what you heard today or you want to add to the conversation, I'll put Lars and my LinkedIn description, just in the description of this video, so you can go ahead and reach out to us there, ask questions, start conversations, or just in the comment section below. We'll see anything you post up there. So again, thank you very much for joining us on this episode. It's been great having you. For Plugged In, my name's Mark Babin. We'll see you on the very next episode. Bye for now.